I had been with Zion for 3 years, but he never once acknowledged me as his girlfriend. I always thought that, to him, I was just someone dispensable. So, when I caught him acting intimately with another girl, and she even called me with a provocative tone, I sensibly packed my things and left. But later, after he saw me hugging a high school classmate, Zion lost control. It was past 10 at night when the social engagement finally ended. Fortunately, although the client was difficult to deal with, the contract was successfully signed. I let out a sigh of relief and left the club with my assistant, Xia. "Hey, isn't that Zion from WC Tech?" Xia lifted her chin. "Sis, look, I'm not mistaken, right? But who's that girl next to Zion? Is she his girlfriend? She's so pretty." I looked up to see. Beside Zion stood a slender figure in a khaki dress. The two were standing by the car, talking about something, and the girl's face was lit up with a bright smile. Xia said, "But last week I saw Zion's interview, and he said he was single. Didn't expect he'd be off the market so quickly." I withdrew my gaze and looked down at my phone. The chat window was labeled with the name Zion. My conversation with Zion had stopped last week, the day Xia mentioned, when he did the magazine interview. That day, he messaged me, asking me to wait for him at the hotel. After the interview, in the presidential suite of that hotel, Zion and I tangled until midnight. At dawn, he just smiled and complimented me once, "You did well last night," then kissed my forehead, got dressed neatly, and went to the company. The car I called arrived, and I said, "Let's go, time to head back." Xia got in first, and as I got into the car, I instinctively glanced toward Zion again. I happened to see Zion gentlemanly opening the passenger door for that girl, even thoughtfully holding his hand over her head to prevent her from hitting it. I had the driver drop Xia off first, then take a detour to bring me back. By the time I got back to the apartment, it was already 11:50 at night. The living room light was still on, and Zion took off his gold-rimmed glasses from the bridge of his nose and walked over to me. He had already showered, wearing the silver-gray silk pajamas I bought last month as a couple's set. "Why so late?" Zion poured me a glass of water. "Are you hungry? Want some late-night snacks?" I shook my head, took the cup he handed me, and sipped the warm water. "I'm going to shower first." Without looking at him again, I went to the bedroom, grabbed my pajamas, and headed to the bathroom. But before I could even get dressed after my shower, Zion came in. He leaned against the doorframe, his handsome and refined face carrying a hint of seductive desire. I froze for a few seconds, then quickly grabbed my pajamas and put them on. When Zion pressed his warm chest against me, I bit my lip slightly, refusing his advances. "I'm too tired today, I want to sleep." He didn't insist, kissed me, and said, "Then you go to sleep first," before going outside to continue working on his tablet. I lay alone in bed, my mind flashing back to the first time I met Zion 3 years ago. Back then, I was new to the workforce and was deliberately forced to drink at a social event. Later, I stumbled out of the private room and accidentally fell into Zion's arms. That night, with blurry eyes from the alcohol, I hooked my arm around his neck and asked, "Sir, want to meet up?" What followed was unstoppable. Actually, Zion was very kind and generous to me. He would drive to the company to pick me up when it rained after work, and on weekends when he had time, he would personally cook a few dishes I liked. We went to the movies together, traveled together, doing all the intimate things lovers do. Over the 3 years, I found myself increasingly unable to control my heart, hopelessly in love with Zion. I thought that since he had suggested living together, there must have been some feelings for me in his heart. But last week, in a magazine interview, Zion said he was single. Tonight, I saw with my own eyes him acting intimately with another girl. The double pain pressed down on me, making my chest feel so tight I could hardly breathe. The next day was the weekend. When I woke up, Zion wasn't in bed. I didn't know if he hadn't come back to sleep last night or if he had gotten up early in the morning. Zion had gone out and wasn't home. I leisurely ate breakfast alone, read for a while, and later, lying in bed with a tablet watching a movie, I gradually fell asleep. I was awakened by a kiss. When I groggily opened my eyes, Zion was pressing down on me, his kisses fierce, and my mind quickly went blank. My hands instinctively wrapped around his strong waist. "Were you angry last night?" Zion asked, one hand undoing my clothes, his eyes locked onto mine without blinking. Angry. I instinctively wanted to shake my head, but Zion leaned down and bit my collarbone. I bit my lip instantly, my hand scrambling to scratch his broad, firm back through his clothes. He was so forceful, as if he deliberately wanted to hurt me. "Tell me, what are you angry about?" I didn't know what I was angry at. Maybe it was because he said he was single in a magazine interview, or maybe it was because he acted intimately with other women. My response was to lift my neck and bite down on Zion's collarbone, harder than he had bitten me. He sighed helplessly, "Why are you so fierce?" A sexual encounter felt like a battle. Later, Zion carried me to wash up and, as if talking to himself, muttered, "You're getting harder and harder to please." I closed my eyes and fell into a deep sleep. For the next month, Zion and I were both very busy with work. He went on business trips to 2 countries in a row, and I was so swamped with the newly established project that I barely had time to stand still. Forget meeting up, we barely even managed a few phone calls. Until the day before the Mid-Autumn Festival, the project I was responsible for finally reached a milestone. On my way back from the company, I called Zion, but he didn't answer. I assumed he was still busy, so I didn't call again. After taking a shower, I was about to head to the kitchen when my phone rang. I picked it up and saw it was an unfamiliar number, but the location was local. I answered, "Hello." "Hi Lydia, this is Selena." I immediately caught the pride and provocation in her tone. "I'm a friend of Zion's," Selena said. I was stunned for a few seconds, then suddenly remembered something. "Selena, was she the girl I saw that night outside the club, laughing and chatting closely with Zion?" Selena's tone was proud and light. "Here's the thing, I want to buy Zion a set of clothes as a gift, but I don't know his size. I wanted to surprise him, so I didn't ask him directly. That's why I called to ask Lydia." I casually picked up the water on the table and took 2 sips. I didn't want to ask what kind of friend Selena's so-called friend really was, and just said, "Selena, you called me, whether it's really to ask about the clothes size or something else, we both know the truth." "Selena, don't worry. If you really are with Zion, I definitely won't cling to him." "That's for the best," Selena said with a smile. "Lydia, you know Zion, he's the kind of person who values loyalty above all. You've been with him for 3 years, there are some things he might find hard to say to you. But I don't see it that way. We're all women here, Lydia. You should understand me, I don't want my boyfriend to have lingering ties with other women. If you, Lydia, are willing to leave amicably, I can give you some money. After all, you've been with Zion for 3 years, I can't let you lose out." "No need for the money." I smiled and said, "Forgot to tell you, Selena, Zion and I were never in a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship. It was just 2 mature adults satisfying each other's physical needs." After saying that, before she could respond, I hung up. Maybe out of stubbornness, she quickly sent me a text, "Lydia, do you know what I like most about Zion? It's the mole in the hollow of his collarbone." The water cup in my hand slipped, spilling half a cup of water onto the silver-gray thin carpet. Selena wasn't wrong. There really was a tiny mole in Zion's collarbone hollow, so small that you wouldn't notice it unless you were very close. I stood by the dining table for a moment, then took out my phone and searched Selena's name online. The results showed a somewhat well-known internet streamer, and the girl's face in the photo matched exactly the one I saw outside the club that night. At that moment, the last shred of hope in my heart vanished instantly. Fine. Maybe it really was as Selena said, Zion had found someone new but didn't know how to tell me, someone who wasn't exactly an old flame. But since he was too embarrassed to speak up, I couldn't pretend to know nothing and keep up the charade. I quickly packed my things, and before leaving, I called Zion again, but once more, there was no answer. Before living with Zion, I had my own place. Although it was a second-hand, old, shabby little apartment, the property deed was in my name. That gave me a strong sense of security and belonging. 2 days later, Zion didn't return my calls, but the media caught him accompanying Selena on a jewelry shopping trip. One was a rising star in the business world, the other a somewhat famous internet celebrity, so when the photos were posted online, they attracted quite a bit of attention. At that moment, I was staring blankly at my phone. Then it rang, and when I glanced at the screen, it was my mom calling. I sighed but still answered. My parents divorced when I was very young because my father had an affair. After the divorce, he took his mistress and their illegitimate child abroad and hadn't contacted us once in nearly 20 years. My mother remarried the year I started college. My stepfather was very kind to me, he paid for my tuition and living expenses. But later, when they had a younger brother, their attention to me lessened considerably. Whenever I went back, my stepfather and mother were always focused on him. Gradually, I stopped going over there so much. Eventually, I spent all my savings to buy a small, run-down apartment for myself. Later on, I lived with Zion. But after all that, I ended up returning to this little home that gave me a sense of security and belonging. My mom called to ask when I would have time to come back. She said my younger brother kept asking why I hadn't returned yet, and my stepfather had mentioned several times that I hadn't been home for a long time. I promised her that I would definitely go back when I had time. My mom was quite happy and said on the phone that before, because of my younger brother and the others, they had neglected me, but I shouldn't take it to heart. I felt a bit choked up, but I smiled and said it was nothing. After hanging up, I combined all the vacation days I had saved up and took a long break. Then I packed my things and headed to the high-speed rail station. My stepfather's home was in the neighboring city, just an hour away by train. While waiting at the station, my phone suddenly rang. I thought it was my mom calling, but when I looked, it was Zion. I was stunned for a few seconds, then hung up and turned off my phone. My stepfather runs a small furniture factory. Business has been good these past few years, and the family has already moved into a slightly bigger house. I brought gifts for each of them. My mom held my hand, her eyes a little red, and she whispered, "This house was bought by selling the old one. Your uncle said we must get a 3-bedroom, so you can have your own room." I was momentarily stunned. My mom took me to see the room reserved for me and said, "Your uncle also said that in the future, you'll have a share in that furniture business. He's just not good with words, doesn't know how to express himself, but in his heart, he treats you like his own daughter." I nodded, my voice a bit hoarse, "I know." At dinner, I called my stepfather Dad for the first time. He was surprised, and after that surprise, he eagerly served me more food, not forgetting to scold my 5-year-old brother not to be naughty and to eat properly. I used to think that my mom, stepfather, and younger brother were the real family of 3, and I was just someone dispensable. But now, I can't help but feel that there are people who truly care about me. My stepfather, mom, and younger brother, their kindness and concern for me make me feel warm. After staying at home for 2 days, my stepfather took us on a road trip to nearby attractions. I completely relaxed and spent a few days enjoying food, fun, and leisure without any worries. It wasn't until the day we returned from the sightseeing trip that I received a call from Seth. Seth used to be our neighbor, we went to the same high school and university, even the same class. In our sophomore year, Seth moved abroad with his parents and disappeared from our lives. Recently, I heard from my mom that Seth had somehow found our home again. Mom still remembered him and gave him my phone number. But this was the first time Seth had called me. On the phone, Seth invited me out to eat, and after a brief hesitation, I agreed. Come to think of it, I had a secret crush on Seth back in college, but at that time, he was the campus heartthrob and top student, with many girls liking him. As for me, my grades weren't outstanding, and in a university filled with beautiful girls, I wasn't particularly remarkable in looks either. So eventually, this budding crush quietly faded away when Seth went abroad. I mentioned Seth to my mom. She smiled and said that Seth had come to our house a few times before, but I was never home. Seth's parents used to be on good terms with my mom, they worked at the same place. So when Seth came looking for me again recently, my mom gave him my phone number. In the evening, my mother and I were picking vegetables together in the kitchen when she hinted around and asked about my love life. I gave a vague answer and brushed it off. Mom paused and said, "Lydia, that Seth kid is doing pretty well now. He's a general manager at a big company, or some kind of investor, and he's quite good looking. Do you want to?" I cut her off. "Maybe he already has a girlfriend." "You kid," she said. "If he really had a girlfriend, would he keep coming back to you again and again?" After dinner that night, I opened my phone and saw a missed call, along with a message from Zion. I didn't open the message, and as for the call, I didn't return it. I blocked the number. Just as I was about to put down my phone, a friend request popped up. It was from Seth. The place where I had a meal with Seth was his choice. I don't know if it was a coincidence or if he deliberately picked somewhere near our high school. Actually, looking back, during those 3 years of high school, Seth and I didn't cross paths much. Seth sat at the desk behind me. He was good at science, and occasionally I would turn around with my math book, humbly asking him to explain something to me. Seth was a top student, and top students are usually quite aloof. The only time Seth and I had a somewhat deeper interaction was when I had my period and stained my pants. He lent me his school uniform jacket, which I tied around my waist to go back to the dorm. Later, when we got to university, there were even more girls around Seth, and I hardly had any chance to talk to him. After that, Seth went abroad with his parents, and we completely lost contact. Time flew by, and many years have passed since then. We were eating and inevitably ended up talking about our high school days. Actually, I wasn't really aloof or quiet back then. Seth suddenly looked at me and said, "Boys, at certain ages, all like to act cool." I made a sound of realization, feeling a bit enlightened. "There was even a time when I talked about you with my roommates. They all said, 'With your looks, you're definitely going to debut as a star someday.'" I curved my eyes into a smile. "But back then, I was pretty worried about you, always afraid you might turn out ugly later on." "Well, I was pretty lucky then." Seth raised his hand to touch his face and smiled. "Look, I haven't turned ugly, right?" I shook my head. He hadn't just avoided turning ugly, this face had shed the awkwardness of high school and college years, gaining a touch of experience that made him look more mature, steady, and charming. After dinner, we took a walk around the nearby artificial lake. After hesitating for what felt like forever, Seth finally couldn't hold back and asked me, "Lydia, that letter I wrote to you before I left that year, did you?" "What letter?" I looked at him in surprise. "You once wrote me a letter?" I really hadn't received any letter from him. Seth grew anxious. "I had your roommate pass it on to you." "You really didn't get it?" I shook my head. Seth pressed his thin lips together, and for a moment his expression was a mix of disappointment and, strangely, a hint of relief. But he never told me what was actually written in that letter back then. When Seth walked me back, he said there were still a few of our high school classmates who stayed local, and that we should get together sometime when we had the chance. I nodded and agreed. I just didn't expect Seth to move so fast. 3 days later, he called me and said he had organized a small high school reunion and wanted to come pick me up to go together. I was a bit stunned. My mom smiled as she picked out clothes for me, while my 5-year-old little brother was causing trouble nearby, sometimes asking what I was going to do, and other times saying he wanted to come too. My mom chased him out of the room, then took my hand and said a few words, basically trying to gauge how I really felt about Seth. I shook my head, and my mom sighed, a little disappointed. This high school reunion didn't have many people, only 6 in total. The place to eat was Seth's choice, a restaurant. I wasn't very close to the other classmates, and we didn't have much in common to talk about, so the meal felt a bit dull. After dinner, everyone was shouting that they wanted to go sing karaoke. I had 2 drinks and, feeling a bit dizzy, declined to go. Unexpectedly, Seth waved his hand and said he would cover the cost for everyone singing tonight, but he had to take me home first. "We're all adults now, some things are just understood." So naturally, there were a few jokes and teasing remarks. I felt a little embarrassed, but Seth, as if nothing was amiss, took my wrist and led me away. On the way back, neither of us said much. It wasn't until we got out of the car that Seth called after me, "Lydia, that letter you never saw back then, are you willing to read it now?" "I've already missed that letter, I'd rather not read it." I pressed my lips together and smiled at him gently. Maybe it was all destined by fate. Seth's tall figure stood by the car door. After a long moment, he let out a reluctant sigh. "Is it because you already have someone you like?" I pressed my lips together and said nothing. After a brief silence, Seth said, "He must be a very outstanding man." I neither confirmed nor denied it, because Zion truly was exceptional. After a while longer, Seth softly said, "Lydia, can you give me a hug?" Just think of it as a farewell between the old Lydia and Seth. I hesitated for a moment, then walked over and gently hugged him. It was a simple, friendly hug. I just didn't expect Zion to suddenly appear. The scene suddenly became somewhat chaotic. I had never known that Zion, who looked like such a refined scoundrel, could actually fight, and so fiercely at that. He yanked me out of Seth's arms and swung his fist straight at Seth. "How dare you touch her? Who are you?" Of course, Seth wasn't going to take the hits quietly. The two grown men quickly exchanged blows, neither gaining the upper hand for a moment. A chilly night breeze swept by, making me shiver. Only then did I suddenly realize what was happening and hurried over to grab Zion. "What are you crazy about? Your boyfriend?" Seth wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and smiled at me. "Lydia, your boyfriend is pretty violent." "He's not my boyfriend." I let go of Zion's hand. "Lydia, what are you upset about?" Zion frowned at me. "If there's something, let's talk it through." I took a deep breath and spoke to Seth. "Thank you for bringing me back, Seth. I have something I need to take care of." "You should go ahead." Seth glanced at Zion, then at me. "All right, call me if you need anything." I nodded, and only then did Seth get into his car and leave. "Who is he?" Zion's grip on me tightened, his eyes bloodshot. "Friend." I answered. "Friend?" Zion suppressed his temper and asked, "What kind of friend would be hugging and cuddling late at night, just the two of you?" His expression was icy, the veneer of civility torn away, like a beast provoked to rage. I looked at him and suddenly laughed. How could he be so double-faced? Wasn't he the one hugging and cuddling with other women first? "Speak. Lydia, you just walk away without a word. What, have you found someone else?" I forcefully pulled my hand free from his grasp, not wanting to argue, and turned to leave. But Zion grabbed my shoulder, forcing me to turn around. He pressed me against the wall behind us. "Am I not good to you, Lydia? But don't you already have a girlfriend?" I licked my lips and looked at him mockingly. "Or are you trying to have your cake and eat it too?" "Zion, I have a thing about emotional purity." I looked at him calmly. "It's fine if you never admit I'm your girlfriend, but since you already have someone else and now you come to me with these half-truths, isn't that just too rotten?" "Lydia." Just then, my stepfather drove back and saw Zion pinning me against the wall. Fearing I was in trouble, he quickly got out of the car and rushed over. Zion left. I ended my vacation on Friday. On Saturday morning, after breakfast and watching a few episodes of cartoons with my little brother, I grabbed my suitcase and my stepfather drove me to the high-speed train station. I resumed my routine life, going back and forth between home and the office every day. Xia told me that while I was on leave, our company's boss somehow got connected with Zion from WC Technology and landed a major project. After that, Zion started showing up at our company frequently. But we hardly crossed paths. I even switched business trips with a colleague for a week just to avoid running into him. When I returned from the trip, I saw a message in the client group saying that a mentally unstable man had moved into our neighborhood. He often rushed at women he saw, grabbing and molesting them forcibly. The police had arrested him several times, but it didn't help. I thought I wouldn't be so unlucky, but that night after work, it happened to me. Suddenly, a figure darted out ahead, and before I could react, he grabbed me tightly. What followed was a nauseating stench, and the bag in my hand fell to the ground. I struggled desperately, kicking and hitting. But the man's grip was too strong, he held me tightly while trying to kiss me. I nearly fainted from fear. 2 security guards ran over from nearby, but before they could get close, the man's tight hold suddenly loosened. Immediately after, the foul-smelling, deranged man was knocked to the ground with a single punch. Still shaken, I was pulled into someone's arms. Looking up, I met the angry yet handsome face of Zion. "Are you okay?" Zion asked, his eyes on me. "The security here is terrible, Lydia. You should move back." It was the place where Zion and I had lived together before. The 2 security guards quickly subdued the man Zion had knocked down with his punch. The other party has a younger brother who is extremely domineering and overbearing. Every time this man is taken away by the police, his brother causes a scene in front of the police station. Once the man is released, he turns a blind eye and lets his mentally unstable brother run wild. I heard from the homeowners group that several young single women living alone have had no choice but to move away because of these 2 brothers. "I'm fine." I pulled away from his embrace and asked in confusion, "What are you doing here?" "The transportation here isn't very convenient, and there aren't many entertainment facilities." "How did Zion end up here?" Zion cleared his throat lightly, "Just passing by." I insisted on calling the police about what happened tonight. Later, the man's younger brother showed up, a burly man named Luther. Luther said he wanted to settle this matter with me privately. He apologized and offered 200 yuan as compensation for emotional distress, saying that would be the end of it. I didn't agree. When I refused, the other party began to issue veiled threats, saying that since we all live in the same neighborhood, if I pushed things too far, it would be awkward for everyone. But Zion stood behind me, protecting me, and stayed with me until the police arrived. Then, late at night, I had to go with him to the police station to give a statement. By the time we finished and got home, it was already past 10 o'clock. Zion stayed by my side the whole time. I don't dare to stay here for the time being, so I plan to pack up and find a hotel to stay in for a few days before renting another place. "Go back and live there," Zion said. "Don't worry, I won't stay there, you'll be living alone." In the end, I shook my head and refused. No need, moving is such a hassle, and I don't want to have to move a second time from there. Zion didn't say anything more, but his eyes darkened slightly. After hesitating, he drove me to the hotel. Meeting Zion again was a week later. It was a Saturday, and I had to work overtime at the company unexpectedly until the evening. After finishing work, Xia and I were eating at the restaurant downstairs when Xia suddenly called out, holding up her phone. "Sis, big news, look." I instinctively tilted my head to look and saw the huge headline on Xia's phone screen, "Famous internet celebrity suspected of stealing company secrets, now formally arrested." The face in the photo was pixelated, but I saw the name Selena. How could it be her? In a flash, something crossed my mind. My eyes widened instantly as I grabbed Xia's phone and skimmed through the news at lightning speed. Sure enough, it was related to Zion. Selena had tried to steal Zion Company's core secrets but was caught red-handed. Before that, they had. My heart suddenly started pounding wildly. After handing the phone back to Xia, I took 2 bites of food, but it was like chewing wax, there was no flavor at all. Xia clicked his tongue and said, "You know, these people really are something. They're internet celebrities with millions of followers, and yet they choose to do illegal things." Zion. I still had food in my mouth. Seeing Xia stand up in surprise, I quickly turned to look, just in time to see Zion walking toward us in a suit. He smiled at Xia and said, "I haven't eaten yet either. Mind if I join you?" "Of course." Zion then casually sat down next to me and, just as casually, took my cup and took a sip of water. "Xia." The girl's eyes rolled rapidly between me and Zion, and suddenly, as if she understood something, she had just sat down and immediately stood up again. Well, Lydia, I just remembered I have something to do, so, I'll just go ahead," she said, grabbed her backpack, and dashed off. I twitched the corner of my mouth. This little girl's acting is just terrible. Zion called over the waiter and ordered a few more dishes. I don't know if it's just my imagination, but everything he ordered was my favorite food. Yet, I had no appetite at all. Zion sat almost right next to me, and the faint scent of mint from him filled my breath, inexplicably making me feel a bit uneasy. What exactly is going on between him and Selena? The question was stuck in my throat. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't bring myself to ask it. So I simply stood up and said, "I'm full." "Zion, take your time eating." "Lydia." Zion sighed, looking at me. "About what happened before, can you give me a chance to explain?" I pressed my lips together and looked at him. After a long moment, I spoke softly, "Sorry, my mind is a bit chaotic right now. Let's talk about it later." Indeed, my thoughts were in turmoil. The news article on Xia's phone was still vivid in my mind, and I wasn't sure if all of this was orchestrated by Zion himself. "Later?" Zion grabbed my hand. "I'm afraid you might never give me a chance to explain after later." But before he could say more, my phone rang. It was the property management from the apartment. They informed me that half an hour ago, the lock on my door had been smashed, by none other than Luther, the brother of that mentally ill man who tried to assault me before. The property management asked me to come back and check if anything was missing. The security guards were still holding him down, and the police had been called. My head suddenly ached. There wasn't much valuable left at home, but there were some precious documents, things I had painstakingly collected. I told the property management I'd be back soon and asked them to wait a moment. Zion heard my words and quickly got up, told the waiter to give the dishes we just ordered to them, then swiped the card to pay, and hurriedly followed me outside. "I'll take you," he said. It was late at night and hard to get a taxi, and calling a ride on the phone might take who knows how long. I nodded, "Then I'll trouble you." Zion frowned slightly but said nothing. After opening the front passenger door for me, he went around the front of the car to the driver's seat. The road wasn't very congested, and half an hour later Zion's car stopped at the open-air parking lot in front of the residential complex. "Lydia." A staff member from the property management saw me and quickly ran over in a few steps. "I just found out some information and I have to tell you. This is an old residential area with only 6 floors, so there is no elevator. I live on the 3rd floor. There is no surveillance on the floors, but the couple living opposite me installed a camera at their door. It was they who saw Luther smashing the door in front of my house and called the property management. I went inside to check and nothing was missing. 2 police officers also arrived." "Lydia, you should already know the situation," the property manager said, looking at me. "You need to decide whether you want the other party to compensate at full price, right?" Zion said, "You won't listen to my explanation because you've fallen for someone else, haven't you?" "Lydia, please don't like anyone else, okay? Luther has already been detained at the police station. The police told me that if Zion and I do not agree to a settlement, Luther will be charged with intentional damage to property and illegal intrusion, and sentenced to more than 3 years in prison." On the way back, Zion looked at me eagerly. "Can you listen to my explanation properly now?" Actually, I already knew the whole story. I called his secretary to ask, and the secretary didn't hide anything, told me everything in detail. It turned out that Zion's company was competing with a rival for a huge project. The rival wasn't as capable, so they played a dirty trick, trying to use a honey trap to steal Zion Company's core secrets. But Zion saw through their scheme early on. The reason he kept Selena close was just to turn their trick against them. Now that Selena has been caught, the mastermind behind it is also in custody. And Zion successfully secured that big project. I just didn't expect him to be so obsessed with this matter. Seeing him look so pitiful and a bit wronged, I couldn't bring myself to refuse. I quietly said, "Your secretary already told me, you and Selena were just playing along." I asked the question that had been bothering me deeply, Selena called me back then, saying she wanted to buy you clothes, and even asked for your size. Did you accept them? Yes, I did. Seeing my expression change, he quickly added, but I told my secretary to throw them away. I couldn't help but tease him, you really are a spendthrift. Zion took the opportunity to grab my hand. I know, you've always been bothered by that time I said I was single in the magazine interview, haven't you? I pressed my lips together and stayed silent. Zion's secretary had also explained this to me, saying that Zion did it to confuse his competitors and to protect me. Still, the fact remains that in these 3 years, Zion never once told anyone I was his girlfriend. I haven't even seen most of his friends that many times. But if I say all this, I'm afraid Zion might think I'm being too petty. Actually, I was planning to propose to you once this whole thing was settled, I'm not lying. Zion sighed, I was still thinking about preparing a surprise proposal for you, but I didn't expect it almost turned into a shock instead. Then he glared at me, alright, I've told you everything I needed to, now it's your turn. What do I need to explain? What do you think? Zion glared at me with a bit of gritted teeth. That night I drove over in the middle of the night, only to see you hugging and cuddling with some man. Hugging and cuddling? I said righteously, that was just a perfectly normal hug between friends. Why are you reacting so strongly? Zion made a move to pinch my face, but I was faster than him and kissed him on the lips right away. 2 seconds later, the tables turned. He pressed my head down and deepened the kiss viciously. I didn't dare struggle, just muffled a few sounds and let this bastard take advantage. 3 days later, I was coming home from work. Just as I was going upstairs, I happened to hear voices from inside the house. Alright, kid, this time we'll finally get to see your precious girlfriend, right? Yeah, every time you bring her out, you never actually bring her. Saying your girlfriend's shy. What's there to be shy about? We're not going to eat her, you know. Shut up. Zion said, you guys behave yourselves, don't scare my wife later. I was taken aback, I could hear the joy in Zion's voice even from outside the door. Then came a string of teasing remarks. My face flushed a little, I took a deep breath, and finally pushed the door open. After everyone greeted each other, they all left, each one shouting before they went, saying that when they had time in a couple of days, Zion should take me out to eat together. Ignore them. Zion grabbed my hand and asked with puppy eyes, how about staying in the same room with me tonight, baby? Stop calling me that. The way he said it made my scalp tingle. Then, Zion suddenly squeezed my hand hard, and I lost my balance, falling right onto him. He looked at me with tender affection, if you don't like being called baby, how about wife? My heart suddenly raced, and just as I was about to speak, he kissed me. Zion's parents were very kind people, and his mother especially took charge of planning and arranging our wedding. Zion and I got our marriage certificate before the wedding. That evening, Zion came to pick me up from work. On the way back, we saw a very young couple walking with their baby who had just learned to walk. The sunset was beautiful and gentle. The little family was gentle too, the parents patiently taught their baby to walk, and the sunlight cast a soft glow over them. I was so captivated that when I came back to my senses, I said to Zion, shall we get our marriage certificate too? Now? Right now. So Zion turned the car around, and before the civil affairs office closed, we successfully got our marriage certificate, becoming the last couple to register that day. When we came out of the civil affairs office, I was still a bit stunned. I stared at Zion and said, you haven't even proposed to me yet, so how did I end up getting the certificate with you in such a blur? Zion lovingly held me as we walked down the steps in front of the civil affairs bureau. How about I propose to you right here? No. Proposing at the entrance of the civil affairs bureau? What kind of idea is that? But that night, Zion still made up for it with a proposal ceremony, right on the bed. I was already drowsy at the time, when suddenly he slipped a ring onto my finger and kissed my hand several times. Sleepiness vanished instantly. I squinted to examine the ring on my finger and asked him, why is your name's initial engraved on the ring? Guess. Zion smiled and kissed me again. wife, how could you think I don't love you? Do you know that ever since that night 3 years ago when you stumbled into my arms and wrapped your arms around my neck, my love for you has been killing me? And you? Zion asked breathlessly in my ear. Lydia, when did you start liking me? You guess. I would never tell him that my fondness and love for him had long since seeped into my very bones, nurtured through years of being together and his kindness toward me.